Hey, Aaron, how are ya?
I'm good, Lindsay. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Welcome back. Again, we are here with the Christian Therapist Podcast and have really enjoyed being able to have these conversations just with each other. And, I know, Aaron, we've talked a little bit more about kind of like high level topics, emotions, theology of emotions. We've talked about oneness in marriage. And today, what we're really going to kind of look at is, man, what makes change so hard? Because it
Mm.
is hard. And I think for us as therapists in getting into this field, I don't know, it maybe for me, maybe not for me. To some degree, there was a part of me that was like, man, I'll show up and give people this advice or help them know what to do, and they'll hear this advice, and then they'll just want to go, they'll just want to go and do things different.
Yeah,
And then week after week, it's like these words of advice fall flat,
yeah,
doesn't do anything,
right.
you know?
Or even the client do this recently, and they trust you, like you have good rapport,
Right.
but you just tell them something true, like this is how this works, and they look at you seriously and going, I don't know that that's true. I don't think that's true. And you're like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you don't think that's? It's literally true.
Yes.
You don't
Yeah.
say that out loud, but inside yourself, you're like flabbergasted. You can't just disagree when I say something's true. Like, am I lying to you? Like, what's happening right now? But
Yeah.
it's just that resistance to change. There's
Yes.
something in the thing we're presenting, and that whatever that feeling is or that belief inside of them just goes, I can't, I can't believe that. So it goes,
Right.
nope, that's not
It's
coming.
not happening. It's not happening. And, for us sitting back and going, man, one, we cannot expect a client to just completely follow our plan.
Right.
We have to be able to start to tune into what are these blocks? What are these resistances? If you know all the right things, but we're still not moving towards health, what's happening?
Yeah.
And obviously, more knowledge about what health looks like is not what's needed,
No,
in
it
those
doesn't.
moments. Yeah, yeah,
There's an aspect too that if they were so easily changed, would they stay changed? Like if they just walked in and were like, I need help, and you're like, here's all the stuff, they immediately like, oh, cool, I'll just believe everything you say.
right.
Who are they going to believe who's the next person who walks up and says anything? You know what I mean? There's a trustworthiness to the difficulty to make sure if it's hard earned, it's more likely to stick around.
Yeah,
But as a therapist, when you're trying to work with them to get them there, and then you just face all kinds of blocks and resistances and all kinds of things, then you're just like, good golly, what are we doing here?
right, right. Yeah. And, what I have discovered in being, in doing this work and, a lot of times in kind of falling flat on my face because things just aren't working is how good we have to start to become as therapists at working with blocks
Hmm.
and working with the resistance and not finding the resistance as a threat, but we're finding the resistance as this almost like this treasure trove
Right.
of goodness, this treasure trove of it can be past memories, it can be past messages, but it starts to unlock what is that thing that's just stopping people from moving. But then there's also a whole other aspect of it too, is that in order to believe something new for yourself, there has to be a level of trust, and it's a level of trust with us, a level of trust with themselves of what we're saying, that it starts to play out over time too. And, I was telling you, I had a client recently as well, was just like, why can't my spouse even move in to trust the change that's happening in me? Like, why can't they do that? And to be able to kind of understand bigger picture that a lot of times these things don't show up as just easy rainbows and sunshine. Like there's a work that we have to do, like a wrestling that we have to do, a building trust over time that we have to do to
Mhm.
help change not feel so scary.
Sure. I really believe that the less you've seen in your life, what you're hoping for, the more difficult it is to trust that it will happen,
Uh-huh. Yes, say
right?
more about
It,
that.
if your longing has always been for someone to show up,
Hmm.
and your history is just that no one shows up, it's
Right.
very hard to trust somebody who says, "Yeah, we can get them to show up," and you're just like, "Well, I don't know that that's true. I've not
Right.
seen." Like you
Yes.
may see that in people. I've never seen that. So the less I've experienced something, the less of a model there is, the less possible it seems, because if it was possible, surely I should have experienced it by now, but
Right.
it's not been there. It's just more difficult to place a trust in something that you have very little experience in, right? Because that's not how you build trust. You build trust through, what Brene Brown says, like 1,000 little micro
Hmm.
reinforcements rather than these big moments. But when even the big moments or the little ones are gone, like there's just not a lot to put your trust in. So it's
Right.
difficult then, if you get a client to make a change in a relationship and you're like, if you do these things are like makes me think of our training on doing couples work with an individual, right?
Oh,
If
yeah, yeah.
our online course. But, it's like if you do these things, this is what they're looking for. They are more likely to respond well to you if you do it like this. And then they do them and they came back and they're like, they don't believe me.
Right. Right.
So it's not working. I'm like, well, it will work, but you've never done those things before. So it's hard for them to trust it's true. If they believe it's true, then we will get the outcome we want. But that gap of if you do this, they're more likely to respond this way. And they're like, well, I did that and they didn't believe me. So what you said's not true. It's not that
Mm.
it's not true. It's just that that other person is having a hard time believing that change is for real.
Right. It's they're saying not that it's not true, period. It's just not ever been true for them,
Right.
which is a
Or
very
it's,
different distinction.
yeah, or it's just too scary to trust.
Yes.
Either you've
Yeah.
never seen it or you need it so bad, the thought of having it and then losing it would be
Hmm.
worse. I'd rather not
Right.
have it than have it and lose it.
Yes. Because that's even what I was telling my client was, I mean, just imagine how scary it is to finally let a defense down, let this kind of new way in, for his spouse. If he or she is now showing up in this different way and the spouse lets their guard down, lets them in, but then all of a sudden the old way shows up and hurts them, right? They're going to push them out and go, no, like I'm not going to let you back in for a long time,
Mhm.
right? And so we have to help our clients expect this pushback because what they need is they need to experience this way of showing up that's new, that's more healthy as the normal, need to
Mhm.
be able to experience that more over time, and then they can start to trust it,
Yeah.
versus just letting it in one time. And if it doesn't come in one time, you know, it, because I don't want to give away what's happening with clients. So kind of thinking about just in general, you might have, um, I don't know, let's say it's a situation where it can be like an adult parent and child, and the adult parent is like, no, I haven't shown up for you. I now want to show up for you. I want to show up for you. They're going to have to continually show up over time, even when they've been pushed away, even if they're not let in, because the main thing is still the main thing. The main thing is
Yep.
that connection, not that we feel good. It's, I'm going to pursue you. Then we can start to trust the new behavior over the old behavior,
Yeah.
which is difficult to do.
And there's a big function, whether it's with a kid or a spouse or a friend, that there's a level in kind of repair or restoring connection where distrust is assessment.
Yes.
People don't think about it. They're not trying to be distrusting on purpose. But
Yes.
the function of the distrust is if you can hold my distrust, if you can hold my distress, if you can hold my anger, then maybe you're safe enough to give my vulnerability to.
Hmm.
But it's very difficult when you try to do something that produces connection, they give you distrust and distress, and then you think that's rejection,
Uh-huh.
right? Then, well, you're
Yeah.
just rejecting me. And they're like, well, clearly you're not safe enough to hold my brokenness, so I'm not going to give you my goodness,
Right.
you
Right.
know? And so then it kind of drives, it just drives in these patterns, these cycles, right? And there you're
Yes.
just trying, whether you got them both in the room or you got one in the room, you're like, how do I get somebody to push through the difficulty of change so we can begin to see the fruits?
Right.
Right? It's
Right.
like tilling the soil is too hard. Like waiting for the plant to grow is too hard. Like I just want to plow, like I just give up.
Mhm.
Versus like if we could do all this hard work, fruit will come.
Yeah.
But you're trying to ask for that trust in something that's immediately produces a feeling of like, I don't know. That's really scary.
Yeah. And we see that a lot too in working with couples with betrayal. It can
Hmm.
be any kind of betrayal, but usually the one who did the betraying um, will then move to a place where it can be really hard to sit in the distress of the one that they betrayed because it can be very shame producing. It can be very embarrassing to keep remembering that that happened. Or they're not good at sitting with pain or having a window of tolerance of being able to sit in distress. So they try
Hmm.
to do everything they can to mitigate that. So then it can be very hard or confusing for the one who was betrayed to believe that they're a different person. You know, the one that betrays a different, did the betraying is a different person. Because I mean, how many times have we heard people say like, "Oh, why are you reminding me of that again?" Or, "Oh, why? Like, I thought we were over this, or this happened 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Why aren't you
Right?
past it?"
Right?
And each response like that can rewound. It can say kind of what you were saying, like, "Oh, you can't hold my vulnerability here anymore. I still have to hold it myself. You can't
Right?
enter into the distress with me," which is what really and truly is going to build trust is getting into the distress with the person that either you wounded or who is wounded, even if you didn't do the wounding.
Yeah, it's very difficult uh, to generate compassion on either
Mm.
side.
Yes.
Right? For the one who betrayed, right?
Yes.
Your pain that I caused reminds me of my shame.
Right.
So now I'm not only holding the pain I caused in you, I have to hold your pain and my shame. And then
Yeah.
that becomes overwhelming. They're like, I can't hold all this. This is too much. Which the one who
Right.
was betrayed says, I'm too much for you, not realizing, well, they're not just holding your pain, they're holding their own shame, but there's no
Mhm.
compassion for the shame part. Like, well, you should hold your shame. You betrayed me. So I don't care
Uh-huh.
about that. You should
Uh-huh.
hold my distress. But functionally, they have to hold both, right?
Yes.
And so generating compassion, the one who was betrayed doesn't want to generate compassion for the one who hurt them.
Right.
The one who betrayed isn't going to receive any compassion for the shame that they carry, which makes that even more difficult, right? So they're holding expanded amounts,
Uh-huh.
which really puts a lot of burden on us as a therapist, which seems odd to hold the betrayer more securely to help them carry this double weight,
Yeah.
right, in the repair. But that sense of connection makes everything easier is true, but the disconnection, everything feels impossible.
Right.
So then, as a therapist, we feel that weight of resistance on both. Like, I don't want to forgive them because I'm still so hurt.
Uh-huh.
I, I'm trying to do everything I can to make it right, but it's never enough because they'll never comfort my shame. They only want me to comfort their hurt. So
Right.
I feel really alone in the process. Like it's just really difficult. There's just a lot of complexity in trying
Yeah.
to, like in betrayal specifically, to generate change in those environments.
Yeah, yeah. And it is. I mean, that's kind of what we're saying in this bigger picture. To start to enter into a place of change means that we are entering into a place where we have to start to look at things we've not wanted to look at, or places that have really been limiting for our whole life that we've just tried to move past or to coast or to bypass and look around. And so change is hard because it is going to bring up painful places that we've not worked through before, that we need to work through. Change is going to point out places of refinement.
Mhm.
And that's what God wants to do. He wants to refine us, and He doesn't want us to walk through that refinement alone. Even those that were in the fire, He was in the fire with them, right? And so it's like, I want to do this with you, but it's because, and I'm not very good at remembering all about what happens to the precious gems and stuff or whatever it is when they go through the fire, but it's like all the impurities come through the top so that we can start to look at them, we can see them, they're not hidden anymore. And then as you start to get those away, you can see more of the image of that.
Yep.
Maybe it's a precious stone. I can't remember. But
It's the metals.
it's
Like when you melt metal, right? It
okay.
separates the pure of the metal with the
Yes.
impurity because otherwise they're just commingled.
Right.
Distress highlights in some ways or brings to the surface the impurity so that they
Yes.
can be removed, but it's very hard to do that when that condition's not there. And God uses those same conditions in us, not to shame us for our sin or our impurities, but to highlight it so that
Right.
we can do something about it, which makes us
Yes.
more pure. Doing that as a therapist is really tricky because often, if we are very uncomfortable with the distress change creates in our own life, then
Yes.
we tend to want to avoid that with our clients. But that's where
Right.
change literally happens.
Yes.
Wherever you're working, wherever you hit that point of resistance, that's the point where change has to happen. It's where all the difficulty is. It's not just that's in the way of change. That is the point of change. And so we're trying to be with them and connect them and hold them and secure them and increase resources at the point of the pain point, right? The edge of tolerance, wherever that is, to uncover what is it that makes this place so hard. Either sometimes it's enduring it while change occurs. Sometimes it's normalizing that nobody's good at new things. I didn't do it well. Well, you've never done this before. Like, no one
Right.
starts out good at doing new
Yes.
things. Like, you have to learn how to do it. So sometimes
Right.
it's just normalizing the trial and error of working it out.
Yes. They're helping people know the way that they're showing up based on their story, based on what was modeled for them, all of this, that it makes sense.
Right.
And just because it makes sense doesn't mean that that's how we always have to then show up.
Hmm.
We then get to own our own story, and we get to allow God and others, because I believe that Jesus lives in all of us that have invited him in, right? The Holy Spirit lives within us when we invite him in, and it's a part of these relationships with each other is where a lot of these kind of impurities, these places of change start to rise to the top.
Yep.
Go, whoo, I don't know that you've looked at that yet, but man, this person's helped you see it, whether they meant to or not,
Yep.
based on your reaction, based on your response, based on looking around and going, do I connect with other people? Like, do I connect with my kids? Do I connect with my spouse? What about God? Like, what are the quality of all of these relationships? How are they?
Hmm.
And what can I learn for myself from them? Can I even ask myself, like, ask other people in my life, like, please be honest with me. Tell me some of these places. How do you experience me? Um, because when we start that searching and knowing process, we start to move back into places that have to do with trauma, and
Hmm.
trauma is its own talk that we can talk about, but
Hmm.
just in how trauma lives in the body and can affect the way that we show up today, right?
Yeah.
So change is hard because it requires us having to go into these difficult places. But the beauty is that with the Holy Spirit with us, with therapists, with others, we don't have to walk through it alone.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
that is, it's still going to be hard, but at least the burden is a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
The burden's not gone.
Yeah, we need that reinforcement of someone helping me see the things I can't see,
Right.
seeking that input, seeking that counsel. Our brain is predisposed to do the things we've all practiced because it's, the myelination process of greasing the neural pathways. When you do it a lot, the brain's like, well, here's what we do here. And then there's this battle between your brain choosing paths for you to help you and you trying to make new choices. There's a
Right.
disconnect in terms of what I'm trying to do and the things that just want to flow out of me because they always have that
Yeah.
sense of the difficulty in navigating that process. And so being with someone in that change process, in that difficulty of trying to be aware of themselves, of catching old habits
Mhm.
as they occur. The hardest thing to do is remembering in the moment you're supposed to do something new. That's the hardest thing.
Right.
uh,
Right.
Giving grace when I don't do it right. Or as I tell my clients, it doesn't matter when you don't do the new thing because literally nothing's different. It's the same as always. It
Yes.
only matters when you do it because then you're strengthening this new path. And so
Yeah.
the grace, the willingness to push, the willingness to try, the comfort of failure, the risk of vulnerability and holding hope or borrowing hope from the therapist of like, I have hope. No, we're not making promises, but I have hope. Borrow my hope where you don't have hope because I
Right.
see a path. Like we're just trying to get there. Really allows them to kind of like have more capacity, less distress in engaging the pain of change so that we can try to get through those stuck points to where there's more fruit, more evidence that tends to build its own energy.
Yes. Yes. And the reason that we go through the difficulties, the pain of change, this place of the refinement, um, is because God wants for us to live free.
Mhm.
And there is a place of sitting back and going, man, if I have these neural pathways, if I have these old messages, if I have these hidden traumas or these places that I've suppressed, and they are actually still controlling me, and I don't know it or I don't want to look at it, then we're not living in freedom. We're going back again, to the yoke of slavery, which is what over and over Paul is like, please, can we not do that? Like, let's live, let's walk in freedom.
Right.
Um, and so it will be hard, but if the payoff is that these places inside of us don't have dominion over us anymore, it does feel like it would be a worthwhile journey, you know?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
agree.
Well, Aaron, good convo today. I've got some ideas from this as to where we're going to go next. So I'm excited to keep the conversation going, and I look forward to chatting with you next time.
Looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun.